I sat with my lawyer. Is this true? She was looking over the divorce papers. I was served the papers 2 days ago. It seemed real to me. She shook her head and read with obvious disbelief. And when did you first find out? I came home the day before I was handed the papers. There was a suitcase at the door, and she was sitting at the table waiting for me. And you knew nothing about it? You just came home and she hit you with that suitcase? I went into the apartment, she called me over to the table, and before I could take off my coat, she told me to sit down. Then she said she was leaving me and wanted a divorce. And then what happened? Nothing. She gets up. I say, wait a minute. You can't just spring something like that on me and walk away. Why are you doing this? And what did she say to that? Nothing. At that moment, I caught some movement in my peripheral vision. I turned around and there's a suit standing in the kitchen doorway. What did the suit say? He never spoke to me. He just looked at my wife and said, "Are you ready, baby?" She nods. He picks up her suitcase and they walk out the door. And then what? Then nothing. He had a car parked under our apartment. What kind? Not that it matters. Something German, I think. I'm not really into expensive cars, but I could tell it looked expensive. She nodded again, as if she'd heard it all before, but continued to flip through the papers. So what happened? Then nothing happened. She left with him, and when I finally gathered my thoughts, I looked around the apartment. Her clothes, jewelry, and makeup were gone. Almost everything else was still there. She was still shaking her head. Such divorce petitions are not common. She's asking to execute a prenuptial agreement. Essentially, she's admitting she cheated. All she wants is what she brought to the marriage. There is mention of a trust that belongs to her. She wants her car, which she says she bought. You keep your retirement account and whatever's in the bank. Ha! Snorted I. My lawyer looked up. Enlighten me. We've been married for 4 years and 5 years out of college. I work as a teacher. My retirement account is small, and our savings can't match her trust. How big is her trust? Several million, I think, but I've never seen it. She has $1 million trust, and you don't even know how much is in there? I paused, searching for words. It wasn't hard to explain, but people didn't seem to understand when I told them. My father was a very successful businessman, but my parents didn't believe in showing it. They thought it was more important to live in society than to use their money to stand out. I had a good life growing up, but it wasn't a life in a mansion, if you know what I mean. We didn't have our own pool, but we went to the public pool on the next street over. We didn't go on exotic vacations to Europe or the Bahamas, but we did go to the beach every summer. My father drove a regular car. He wore a suit to work, but it wasn't Armani. My mom had some nice jewelry, but nothing that would make her a target on the street. They just weren't into that kind of thing. Sounds like they were nice people. They were. They died in a car accident when I was still in college. I miss them to this day. She looked at me for a moment and asked, So what did you do then? I went to live with my cousins. I went on to college and met Diane. So Diane never met your parents? No. But she met your cousins? Oh, yes. She met her cousins, my aunt and my uncle. I suppose they mostly didn't like her. They never said anything bad about her, but they didn't say anything positive either. My lawyer nodded again. What's her family like? Oh, they have money and they want everyone to know about it. As far as they knew, I didn't have any and they treated me like some trailer trash. What's your wife's maiden name? Parkinson. She looked up with surprise written on her face, but it quickly disappeared and the professional mask fell back into place. Her father wouldn't happen to be Jeffrey Parkinson, would he? I nodded. Yes, that's him. Business tycoon, captain of industry, man of wealth. Her brain was spinning at a mile a minute. I could practically hear it humming. Does it mention your inheritance? What is it? Well, I don't usually like to talk about it. I was their sole heir when my parents died. I wasn't ready to run my father's business, so I let his lawyer handle the sale of the company, and all the money went into a trust he set up for me. I figure he'll be useful to me when I need him, but for now I'm just a working teacher trying to make a career. Can you tell me how much is in the trust now? About 50 million, I think. And you're a working teacher? Yes, I'd heard that before. I believe the money is for me to do work that gives me a sense of fulfillment. They're not so I can sit on my ass or buy a yacht or anything like that. They just give me the confidence to do things that give me a sense of fulfillment. And teaching brings you satisfaction. It was more of a statement than a question. Yes, I've had some wonderful teachers, so I figured this was one way to repay them. My lawyer leaned back in her chair. She seemed to be sizing me up. Does Diane know how much money is in the trust? I had to wonder. She knows it exists. I don't know if I ever told her the amount. She insisted that we keep our finances separate, and we do separate tax returns every year, so she's had no reason to see the numbers. So, from her point of view, you're a teacher with a small inheritance. Is that correct? I hadn't given it much thought. Now that you've said it, I assume it's true. I recommend you sign it today before she changes her mind. Her words knocked the spirit out of me. Let me be honest with you. The law is about money and little else. There are other considerations when it comes to children, but without children, it's all about money. I know a little about your father-in-law, Mr. Jeffrey Parkinson. He built a house of cards, and all it takes is the slightest breeze to bring it down. My relatives in Texas would say he's all hat and no cattle. As far as I can tell, he's got everything leveraged to the max. The big question is, do you want to pay it back? What an interesting question. I thought about how her family treated me and how she treated me when we were with them. That was the first blow. I always knew she cared too much about money to the point of jealously guarding her trust fund. That was the second blow. Then there was the suit and the way she left with it. That was the third blow. I made my decision and shook my head. No. Then I suggest you sign this agreement right now. I can explore your trust if you really want me to, but as long as she leaves it to you, I suggest that you keep what's yours, let her take what's hers, and get on with your life. I took a deep breath in and exhaled. She was right. I had failed in my marriage, and it was time to face that reality. She called her secretary into the office and asked her to bring the notary's seal. I signed, my lawyer witnessed it, and her secretary notarized it. I will return them to her lawyer today. Her lawyer did a good job. This case is tighter than a mouse's sphincter. She can't come back to you later to take possession of your trust. I must have looked confused, so she explained. Daniel, her life is smoke and mirrors. When her father's empire collapses, her world will change, and not for the better. You need to be away from her when that happens. I've never met your wife, but she seems like the kind of person who uses people, and you don't want her using you. I just nodded. She was right. It was a painful lesson, and I learned it the hard way, but I learned it nonetheless. Visit your cousins. A little distance will help you see things in a new way. She wasn't wrong. Diane left me on the last day of class, and I filed out on the first day of summer vacation. I decided that's what my trust was for, so I used enough of the funds to pay my expenses over the summer and spent time with my in-laws. They needed help on the farm, and I needed a distraction. In every sense, it was homecoming time, and it was during that summer that I finally realized my life. I now realized that all the pieces fit together except for one, my soon-to-be ex-wife. I had always been just an add-on to her real life, and now I was free to rearrange my life the way I wanted. I returned to the city a week before the new school year started and found my apartment stuffy and my divorce finalized. I had no idea what Diane was doing, and I didn't care. A year and a half passed when I learned that Diane's father's business had collapsed. The economy went down and the income went down with it. It was a surprisingly small blip in the overall economy, but apparently what I was told was true. The banks took out a loan and he didn't have the money to pay it back. This led to a domino effect of one loan after another demanding repayment until he sold his company. He kept his home and most of the trappings he cherished, but everything new and it almost killed him. Most of his employees kept their jobs, although there were layoffs in management. Suit was one of them. Very unfortunate, very sad. The only thing my lawyer was wrong about was that Diane never came back looking for a second bite at the apple. In my mind, I imagined her father trying to clean up her trust fund to bolster his business, but as nasty as they were, I doubt even he would stoop to that. I suppose she never realized that my own trust was worth anything, and I wasn't inclined to tell her that. Whenever I think of Diane and our marriage, which is not often, I wonder what our lives would have been like if she and her family hadn't treated me and my family so condescendingly. She never realized that life is not about money, but that the purpose of money is to help us live our lives more fully. She was so concerned with keeping what she had and hiding it from me that she never appreciated all that I had to offer. Well, as they say, water under the bridge. Life goes on, and for me at least, it's a good one.